Welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Today we are tackling the second episode of Metroid Prime 3's Hyper Mode Challenge. And, well, last time we took down all of Norian, as well as the tutorial area. Today, the game's going to actually let the gloves come off a little bit,
Glad to hear you're feeling
and we
better.
can get
You've
into
been
the
cleared here
actual
today,
meat
Eugene.
of the game.
Please proceed through these doors and up the lift.
So,
The Aurora unit is expecting you.
there are a couple things that need to be mentioned here. Number one, I apologize about the sound quality concerns last week. Today, our goal is to hopefully
Confirmed, G5.
chase
Opening
down
chamber
and
vault.
reach Rundus. That is a possibility that it might not come to pass, but I think that actually having an idea of what the stakes of the game are is important, and the Aurora unit can say it a heck of a lot better than I can.
Welcome, Samus Aran. Let us begin. Time is most critical. During the attempted pirate invasion of Norian, it was confirmed that two nearby planets were similarly attacked. These planets are named Bryyo and Elysia. These leviathans have impacted and embedded themselves deep into each planet, spreading a virulent phazon carried inside their bodies. The Leviathans must be destroyed. 2 weeks ago, we dispatched Rundus to Bryyo, Gore to Elysia, while Gandreda was sent to locate the space pirate stronghold. Like you, they were outfitted with PED devices in order to confront this new threat. We lost contact with all of them 7 days ago, and fear the worst. In their absence, we need you to travel to these planets and finish their missions. The closest planet is Bryyo. This will be your first objective. Please be on the lookout for any clues that might help us understand what happened to Rundus and the other hunters. Good luck.
Well, there it is. Plain, simple, to the point. Our mission is to carry out everyone else's mission, more or less, starting with Rundus and dealing with the space pirate invasion of the planet Bryyo. Bryyo is a unique planet as far as Metroid goes, in that it exists in a consistent half and half. One half of the planet is incredibly hot, always facing the sun. One half incredibly cold.
Samus, the fleet is now moving to the rendezvous location. You will no longer be able to dock with us from this point forward. Rest assured, we will keep communication lines open and supply you with information when necessary. Good luck on Bryyo.
One side incredibly cold as it's always away from the sun. And a little strip in the middle. 4% of the total surface of Bryyo is actually habitable land. This is around the area of the Thorn Jungle Air Dock, which is, coincidentally, where we're headed. There are 3 air docks to speak of. One is the fiery hot area, one is the Thorn Jungle, and one is more of a verdant paradise on the other side. All 3 of these are actually relatively close together as far as the planet goes, but it shows just how quickly things heat up on the planet itself. Now, I've had a little bit of time, and by that I mean almost a year, of looking into this series. And I hate to be the person who gives this kind of negative outlook, but I have come to appreciate that Metroid Prime trilogy is probably not within the same timeline as the original 2E series.
Samus, the Leviathan seed is protected by an energy shield. You will not be able to reach it with that barrier active. We need more data to determine how the shield can be disabled. You are near the wreckage of a downed Federation vessel. If you can use the satellite uplink on the ship, you may be able to access information concerning the seed. Prepare to receive the ship's coordinates.
Anyway, the main reason I've come to this conclusion has to do primarily with Metroid Prime's main storyline, not necessarily coinciding nicely with the Metroid franchise's history, specifically between Metroids 1 and 2. In Metroid 1, we learn of the Metroid's existence, and Samus's whole mission is to either capture or destroy all the Metroids that end up on planet Zebes. But see, this was the beginning of the end. Metroid Prime takes place, theoretically, directly after, but we learn that there is a species of Metroid on the planet Talon 4. And that in and of itself isn't necessarily a plot hole. There are reasons for it to have arrived, including having been brought with the frigate Orpheon to the planet Talon. And that's all well and good. But then it shows up again on Aether, and again in the Valhalla, and again in the Space Pirate homeworld, and again in on Phase. And so, really, Metroids, by the time that Samus actually gets a chance to solve the issues of the Metroids in general as it pertains to the Prime series, they have more than eclipsed the point of no return. See, Metroids are an invasive species. Not just any old invasive species. It's the apex of invasive species. Their entire purpose is to wipe out a parasite of such incredible strength and durability, shall we say, that it is next to impossible to wipe out completely. To combat this, there were measures taken on SR-388 to prevent overpopulation of this species, specifically overpopulation of the Metroids. But the big issue with it is that Metroid Prime throws all of this out of whack, because now we have dozens of Metroids on various planets, not just one or two. And at the point that Metroid Prime series reaches by the end of the trilogy, there's really no way to prevent the further spread of Metroid, and is, in my opinion, a huge plot hole for the entire franchise. Unless it were to be taken as somewhat separate. Think of it like the Zelda timeline, where the child and adult timelines can coexist, technically. We'd end up with the Metroid and Metroid, or the classic Metroid and Metroid Prime timeline, which one stems from the original Metroid and one stems from Zero Mission. Technically, both stories begin in the exact same way, but Zero Mission specifically has the space pirates escape via 3 separate vessels. In this way, there is a concrete beginning and a concrete end of the franchise. This is my main, I suppose, solution to the plot concerns. as it doesn't necessarily one side of this goes to deal with the Metroids as a whole. The other chooses to focus more heavily on the space pirates, and another phase on. Either way you look at it, both stories that are told are dramatically different, but also feature much more open-ended storytelling in that way. Effectively, two complete arcs. But they can't coincide because the Metroids are as powerful and as persistent as they become in later Metroid. That's my 2 cents on it. If you disagree, feel free to disagree. Write it down in the comments and why you believe that my stance on this is wrong. But if you agree, I don't know what to say. In my mind, I would love everything to be connected seamlessly, easily. But the problem with this seamless ease of connection between games is it does lend itself to plot. It does lend itself to small nitpicks that might not break immersion for some, but for others it just changes the outlook on the entire franchise. Anyway, I suppose I should get into what combat is going to look like for the foreseeable future with Metroid Prime. Unlike Metroid Prime 1 and 2, where a lot of my opponents were dealt with using means of missiles and power bombs being my other favorite weapon to fiddle with, there's really only one major solution with Prime, and that is the use of Hyper. I know, shocking and painful though it may be, Hyper Mode has, I suppose, 3 major problems that need to be addressed. First and foremost is that Hyper Mode in Prime 3 was the answer to an oversight. Their initial idea of Hyper Mode was that Samus could access virtually any locations. She could access Phazon energy in and of herself, like Dark Samus and the Metroid Prime had prior to this game. But it came at a cost. The cost being that now that Samus is ill and is self-generating Phazon in and of itself, she is in a constantly deteriorating health state. Technically. They claim there's no negative health effects, but we know different if we play the game. Metroid Prime 3's primary story relates back to the control of Phazon. Phazon, for everything that it is good for, is also a extremely dangerous and extremely potent substance, especially on the mind. It has a tendency to make the strong stronger by altering their DNA and slowly but surely building them into something more than they were yesterday, at the cost of losing their sense of self. This is the crux of the issue with Metroid Prime 3. Samus, along with the other hunters, was infected with this virulent Phazon, as they called it so eloquently, which is that it's slowly but surely taking over her body, growing and getting stronger by the day. Samus only has so long before the Phazon truly doesn't damage to solve the game's problem. And what I love about this particular system is that there's a sense of stakes that is not present in some of the other games, not all, but some. where there's this, I suppose, time-sensitive pressure applied. In Metroid 1, really most of them, all of the missions had to be completed. But this time sensitivity has only really existed in its fullest form during Metroid Prime 3. And to a somewhat... No. Fusion also had some very significant time pressure elements. The time pressure aspect is something that Metroid has done exceedingly well over the franchise's history. And even look as far back as the original, where they had the escape sequence and the planet began to explode. Metroid is very known for these sequences, these moments where the pressure is applied rather consistently to the player. And so, Prime 3, when you reach the point of it putting pressure on the player, it's more so that it's trying to get the player to finish the game before Samus truly falls to the illness that is Phazon corruption. And I think that, while it could potentially be done better, Metroid has always had a good grip on creating what could be seen as stakes in the form of time pressure. And even as far as Metroid Dread has had it as well, where Samus is effectively trying to escape a planet with a rather powerful being chasing after in the form of Raven. The series has consistently delivered in that regard. So, overall, if I were to say anything about the franchise, it would be most likely consistency. Every game has done an incredible job at showcasing their world in a way that I don't believe very many could. Prime 3, well, admittedly, each planet doesn't get the same amount of love as Aether or Talon 4 did. Each planet gets its own set of lore, its own set of history.
Samus, the satellite data has revealed two distinct energy
History.
signatures. They must be supplying power to the siege shield. If these targets are eliminated, the shield will be removed. We are uploading the location of each energy signature and nearby landing sites.
This consistency across each planet proves to show that the devs knew, and to this day still do, know how to make each planet unique in a very short span of time. Where Metroid Prime had smaller instances of, oh yeah, this is what's going on, this is what led to this, so on and so forth. This is Metroid Prime. We're gonna deal with both the lore of not just the space pirates, but also the lore dealing directly with Samus's parents, shall we say, in the form of the Chozo lore as well. How the planet got to be what it was. And while I'm not discussing this yet, as I believe it will be better served next time, bryyo was a verdant paradise much like Talon 4 until a civil war broke out. And so you're getting not just the basics of what's going on each given area, but you're also getting you're getting about as much information on each individual planet as you did each individual culture in the original series. for 1 and 2. This, to me, showcases how much more in-depth Prime 3 became as far as a storytelling perspective. But it gained and lost in many ways. Most of us have probably looked at Prime 3 in a slightly less than favorable lens because of the world itself not being as intertwined as other games have been. Ultimately, your decision on that, or your choice or belief, I can't refute. Every single person is entitled to their perspective, especially on a franchise such as this. And I'll be the first to admit that I might not agree, but I will defend to the death your right to say your beliefs. Anyway, we are now in the Bryyo Fire location. And Bryyo Fire is kind of I'll admit this is about as linear as Metroid has ever gone. And while I initially would have said this was a bad thing, I believe that it's actually a good thing in this particular instance. See, up until this moment in time, yes, there has been a little bit of puzzle solving here and there. There's been a little bit of combat. This section is meant primarily to showcase how the combat, the puzzle solving can become. Like, I want to take this series of events here. So far, you've opened up 2 gates using fire, a third one using 2 separate flame pillars, simply so as to flip over a piece of rock to enter another room. Use the bug guys that you saw prior to getting the grappling hook to fly up here, and of course you can get a couple extra upgrades while you're at it, like this wonderful missile tank. But then you also have the access to more combat in the form of fighting off the Bryonians. You have more in terms of lock and key style progression, shall we say, using effectively everything you've gained up to this point, learning about using switches, pulling off rubble, even the hyper mode itself is all showcased. If you cannot progress through this relatively short, linear section, then you won't make it through the rest of the game. And that's, I think, what this section is meant to showcase. It's not meant to be this negative output, but rather a microcosm of what to expect from the game as a whole. And the stakes have been raised. Now, we know what's going on. Phazon within Samus's body is reacting to the Phazon below. And she has to expel all Phazon from the suit as soon as possible so that the PED can return to a state of normalcy.
Samus, we just received very abnormal readings from your life support systems. Are you okay? As a precaution, we are downloading the diagnostic data from your suit to further analyze this situation. We will contact you again if we have any more information.
This, of course, is the same issue that affected the other hunters. Samus, having the PED suit, is constantly at odds with the Phazon within her body. As a result of this Phazon corruption that has taken hold, Samus is effectively stuck in a perpetual cycle. the more she uses it, the more dangerous it becomes. Because, lo and behold, the more it gets a hold on Samus. Likely, other hunters didn't have the same kind of phase-on reaction that Samus did. No early warning sign that something was off. And as a result, didn't end up proceeding with any degree of caution and allowed the phase-on to take hold. That is my guesstimation. Metroid Prime 3 has every hunter has a purpose, had a purpose prior to what happened on North. And if I'm being as abundantly honest about it, I believe that the events on Nornian caused far more devastating effects than we would like to believe. Rundus was, albeit a somewhat cocky but chivalrous hunter in and of himself, was always willing to lend a hand, especially to those that he perceived as an equal. Now, it is interesting to say it like that, but Rundus never once addresses the other hunters, to my recollection. There are moments where he addresses Samus, and, justice will prevail and all that, right, Samus? But his conversations with Gore and Gandrada are non-existent. He is solely focused on the one hunter he believes to be his leader. Now, Gore and Gandrada are both incredibly potent hunters. If anybody deserves to be on the rank of Samus, these three definitely fit the bill. But it is interesting to note that Rundus was so invested in his own strength that he couldn't acknowledge the other two. He, of course, loses himself to phase-on corruption, as do the rest of them. And I find that it's perhaps a little bit short-lived. I believe that each of the hunters could have had a lot more involvement, but even then, they still went out of their way to make each of the hunters unique enough to be remembered on a basis of just being a hunter. But they also took the time to make each of the three other hunters show off a different aspect of being a bounty hunter within the Metroid universe, where Rundus and Gore were both sent to deal with delivering the vaccine to the other system or other sections of the system. What the? I can't. What the heck? Okay, that's ridiculous. So I guess I'm... Nope. Alright. Well, that's weird. Rundus has the physiology to handle the extreme heat of the fire section of bryyo. And so he is sent into the most, well, shall we say, the more dangerous location as far as a world itself is described. And then you have Gore, who is technologically savvy, capable of making virtually any piece of tech work alongside him, as well as with his ridiculously powerful suit of armor that also just so happens to be a means of interplanetary travel. And Gandrada is tasked with infiltrating for finding and infiltrating the space pirate stronghold. This, in my mind, is probably the hardest job, but it's one that Samus has received multiple times as well. Samus's suit defends from extreme heat. Samus's suit is capable of interfacing with technology to a degree that I don't believe that Rundus would be capable of. And so on and so forth. There's a lot of moments that showcase that Samus is really the be-all end-all, the every hunter kind of character, so to speak. She has every other hunter's abilities to some degree. I argue that she can't blend in like Gandreda, but everything else is fair game. Anywho, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a subscribe, we'll catch you next time.